guest, who we will introduce in just a moment. Again, for those of you who don't know, the Accounting Alchemy Network is on a mission to empower the accounting profession to be a vehicle for positive transformation. What do we mean by that? Well, we mean a lot of things by that. But for example, a lot of our conversations have centered around climate justice and climate action and racial equity, and how accountants can really serve as really a vehicle for helping our clients to understand how they can prioritize people and planet over profit. One of the things that we do is host our monthly Lyceum series, where we bring on special guests who have unique insights on the ways that they're functioning in the world that might be of use to you as an accounting professional, in helping to understand how you can be an agent for social transformation. So we've got a lot of beautiful conversations to have today. But for those of you who aren't aware, again, remember, if you're on our Facebook group or on our LinkedIn group, we do have a lot of our replays available there. We've got a YouTube channel. So please go back, check out some of the content that we're sharing in those environments. But nonetheless, let's go ahead and jump on over to Ingrid, who's going to introduce our guest today and get our conversation going. Over to you, Ingrid.
Thank you, Matthew. And apologies for anyone watching the replay on YouTube. We got just a moment of false start as a pop-up happened to decide to pop up. Thanks, technology, in the midst of me clicking start webinar, which was somehow leave meeting. And that was not effective in me starting the webinar and hitting the record button. So yeah, here we go. I am super excited to introduce Mike Trugman. Mike and I were introduced by a coach friend of ours many months ago. And our very first meeting, I feel like we jumped straight into just kind of like the go deep or go home kind of friendship conversations. And since then have just, every time we get together, it's all right, how do we save the world today? And yeah, our last conversation, you were telling me about your work with AllKings and how that's been impacting your work. I'm like, wait. Everyone needs to hear this. This is amazing. And so, Mike, I would love it if you can give us a little bit of background on your history in accounting, your podcast, and then Matthew and I are going to ask you all about your recent experience with AllKings and how that has impacted your work.
Yeah. So very briefly, I went to school about 10 years ago, majored in accounting, was at a big accounting firm, Grant Thornton, for about 6 years. I made it to manager there. And that's when my quarter life crisis happened. I couldn't reconcile who I was with the way that a business was being done there, or why I even chose accounting in the first place. And one of the many reasons that I have found it so refreshing to connect with you, Ingrid, and Matthew, is I didn't know there was this pocket in the universe where there were accountants who were talking about all the things that Matthew was talking about at the onset. I had to close my eyes and take a deep breath because of the level of import of what you're doing at the Accounting Alchemy Network. And these are all things that I've come to realize are super important to me, that I drifted from. And when I was in a public accounting firm, it just didn't feel like any dots were connecting for me. And I really care about being on a planet where all of us, and with us, I include the planet, all beings are thriving. And Ingrid, you have planted a seed in my mind around this word sustainability. And sustainable means that we're kind of just like cruising at a certain level, and there's nothing wrong with that. But regenerative is the word that I love that each of you use. And what if we lived in a regenerative planet, and we're a regenerative species? So my podcast, Mike's Search for Meaning, I think it's an attempt to try and understand all the other pockets of the universe. And like, this is an incredible pocket of the universe, but there's all sorts of different ways we can heal individually and collectively. And my humble attempt at grasping all of this one of them is my podcast, where we talk about consciousness, healing, therapeutic modalities, nutrition. I want to have a farmer on at some point. I want to talk about regenerative agriculture. Like, I talk about DE&I work, everything that contributes to all of us feeling like we can thrive collectively. And my coaching business is also an extension of that. So The accounting industry, I think, is a really interesting. I guess I'll let you take it from here. But the accounting industry, I never looked at myself as a steward for healing through accounting, but I look at that now as a really big opportunity for me to, like, in a sacred way, help people build their business and have a healthy relationship with themselves and their money.
Yes, thank you so much. And I love the conversations that we've been getting into around stewarding those narratives within our world, because really when it comes down to it, accounting professionals are where a lot of people, as adults anyway, learn about money and finance. When we're kids, we learn about it from our parents. We just kind of absorb information through osmosis. And as accounting professionals, as we're teaching our business owner clients and our personal finance clients how to manage their finances and what it looks like to pay your taxes and create a plan. And oftentimes it's very unconscious. We're just teaching whatever we've been taught, and we haven't been questioning, is what we've been taught right? Is that the only way of doing it? Is it the best way of doing it? And now we're asking ourselves these questions, and we're realizing, wait a second, are we making choices that are sacrificing our deeply held personal values and beliefs on the altar of profit? How can we shift that? And I love that more and more accounting professionals are starting to recognize that and say, okay, how do we do it more holistically? What does it even look like? So thank you so much, Mike, for joining us in these conversations. And would you tell us a little bit about AllKings? I want to get straight into the meat, because I know that this is going to kind of burst the
Yes.
conversation wide open. What is the AllKings organization, and when did you first hear about them? How are you participating with them?
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna do it in a way that makes sense to me, that I think addresses all your questions. I was listening to Gabor Mate on a podcast. I forget which one it was. It might have been Tim Ferriss. And he was talking about a documentary called The Work, which took place in Folsom Prison in California. And they were talking about the healing work that was being done by guys who had committed atrocious crimes and have, of course, been through incredible trauma in their lives. So I checked out the documentary, The Work, and oh my God, I was so moved by it. So I'll just plug that. If someone gets nothing else out of this conversation except check out The Work and the power of this healing work and men's circles, then I mean, that in and of itself is worth the price of admission here. So when I saw The Work and the transformational healing that is happening in prisons, I think that I didn't have the words for it, but I've always had this sense that we have lots of different systems that are reinforcing damage and trauma in lots of different ways. But the prison system, my best attempt at this in like a 2 minutes or less version, a lot of people who end up in prison did not get, this is a big understatement, got nothing of what they needed when they were young. They were deeply traumatized, brutalized in a lot of ways. And so as a result of that system, they don't know how to process their emotions. They've never taught that. So a lot of times what happens is we release anger in a really unhealthy way, which a lot of us do anyway, but we were taught not to be violent, at least. Men who come from no means, who are in, raising gangs, they learn, I have to protect myself in this way. They end up in jail. The patterns are reinforced because jail is a brutal place to be. And if there isn't a restoration or healing that happens, then when they're released from jail, they're going to do the same thing again, just like any of us. We all do what we've been conditioned to do, unless we learn otherwise. So when I saw the healing that was happening by these super skilled facilitators, I was really intrigued by it. I wanted to find an organization that was similar to that in New York, because I don't live in California, I live in New York. AllKings is a spin-off organization of the organization that did The Work. It's called Inside Circle. Inside Circle is another incredible organization that I recommend people check out. And when I learned about AllKings, I wanted to get involved. Now, I think an important thing for me to speak to here is that there was still a white saviorism, I think, Like I felt like I had this special gift that I could bring to AllKings, and that I wanted to help men who were formerly incarcerated. And I did a weekend. They call it a quest weekend. It's in the woods. It was 3 full days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. No phone, just being connected to nature. So there's that element too of being in the woods and being supported by the land. And I could get into a whole bunch of different things about what happened that weekend, but that weekend transformed me in several different ways around money, race, my relationship with my father, my relationship with myself. So I'll let you guys follow whatever curiosities you have from here.
So much curiosity. And I can see Matthew like reaching for the mute button also. Go for it, Matthew.
Yeah, I mean, there's already, I mean, just going back to your intro, so I'll kind of like pepper some things on the table and then we can decide what we want to snack on. Because you've brought up a lot of things. And it goes back to like when you're talking about your, how I would define it, your sort of traditional entry into the accounting industry, and you became the thing and worked for the thing and, you know, kind of evolved in that way. And I immediately started thinking about, you know, just like the challenge that the industry is having right now around attracting talent. And there's this quote talent shortage, and sort of understanding like, okay, well, what is your perspective on that, and having gone through this transition where you're now seeing something different that you didn't see before. And it goes back to this question of you know, there's something obviously that changed for you, that shifted in your experience, and that allowed for you to be something or become something different than you were. And it goes back to this question of you know, Ingrid was talking about like stewarding the money story, and that's something that we talk a lot about in our conversations around what is a regenerative accountant. And so then I started to think like, oh wow, what was your evolution, or what was that thing that changed for you, that helped you to see something different? And then it kind of brought me to this other question as you continued your journey of you know, the fact is that there's a lot of white men who have explicitly dominated the industry, in many industries, and you brought up this experience that you went through around connecting to nature and unpacking some of the stories around money and racism and what I would define as sort of healing the father wound. And so anyway, so there's a lot, you know, you brought up a lot. And so I'm kind of curious, like if you can maybe go a few inches deeper into some of this stuff and just kind of help, you know, respond to some of these things that I'm sharing, because I'm curious where you're going to take this and where we can take this. So I'm going to pass and go.
Well, thank you for those. Are beautiful reflections. I'm taking lots of deep breaths because there's so much to unpack here. But so on the first end of things, I was just thinking about how much we are all meaning-making machines, and how powerful the story that we tell ourselves is. And so one of the shifts that happened for me with my relationship to accounting is the story that I initially told about accounting is that it's a meaningless kind of dead end, I'm just helping the rich get richer job. And the particular flavor of work I was doing at my first job was pretty monotonous. It's something that AI will certainly be doing at some point in the not so distant future. So one of the things that's really helped me is to shift the story that I tell about accounting. And one of the ways that I've shifted that is by connecting with amazing people like you. So I now have a more empowering belief about not only accounting, that I can be the steward of people's money stories and help businesses that I'm aligned with that have deeply committed values that are regenerative and helping the planet, all these things I care about, that an accountant is a really big part of making that a reality. I think that I've rewritten the narrative that I have about any job. I used to have these binary stories of XYZ job is meaningful and accounting and other jobs are not meaningful. And just shifting that in and of itself, that being in any profession, there's an opportunity to be a human who is making an impact. And that has been, it's easy to say that, but there's been lots of inner work that I've done. I work with a coach. I have attended lots of different trainings, all of these different ways to really go in and sit with myself and realize I have a chance and a choice to show up as the person I say I want to be, no matter what my job title is. And so I think that that's how I look at the way that you set the table on the first question. As far as like what shifted specifically for me in this AllKings weekend, I think, but without living an experience, that it's one thing to listen to podcasts that resonate with me and to watch a documentary that resonates with me. But I still had all these deeply internalized beliefs that there's still something really flawed about a person who's been in jail for 20 years. Like that person this is again, a story that I had. Like that person's dangerous. That person is flawed, broken. It feels uncomfortable to say that out loud, but I think deep down within me, that's what I really believed. And that by showing up to this weekend could be a gift that would help fix them. And I know better as a coach than I know that that's not true. And I want to, celebrate everyone in their wholeness, et cetera, et cetera. But, and there was a level of the people around me in my life were very fearful for my safety. And maybe another shadow side, people thought what I was doing was super courageous and that I was the brave one. And when I was there, one of the many things that shifted was, can I curse? Holy curse word. You could figure out what I would say. These guys are extraordinary humans. What they've been through and the fact that they're able to still show up to life with the conviction and courage that they have, I was in awe of every single person there. And that tone, the container was set right from the onset. As soon as I walked in, safety was established, men were opening up, and everyone was communicating very clearly their emotions, their wishes for the world, the things they'd been through. And so a lot of the weekend was organized in a way that we went deep right away, but it started at a manageable level. Some people resisted, other people not as much. And by the end of the weekend, I just felt this immense love and compassion for every single person who was there in a felt way that listening to a podcast can't possibly achieve. I was eye to eye with people who I had these, like I said, really negative stories about. They're flawed, they're broken. And just seeing the pure love and consciousness in their eye and hugging them. There were lots of times where I was just walking up to another guy unprovoked and we would just hug each other or like put our hands on each other's heart and just look at each other in the eyes. And what I've internalized from that is we all of us just want to be seen. We want to be heard. We want to be loved. We want to matter. And there's lots of different ways of getting around that. Another important detail that I think I've omitted a little bit, I did this weekend with my father. So I was going through a lot of my own stuff with my dad there, who's an amazing father, but also every parent contributes to some of our stuff. So I was working through some of my father wounds, like you said, Matthew, with my father there, and the depth of connection that we were able to have based on me being seen by him and him acknowledging me and validating my experience. I had these, like, I get goosebumps just thinking about it, these like guttural cries, and my dad was just there witnessing me. And I saw him working through his father wounds with my grandfather, who was not there, but my dad had a much tougher upbringing than me. And I venture to guess every other man who was there had a much tougher upbringing than me. And yet we all wanted the same thing. Like when I was doing my work with my dad during this weekend, I could see other people in the circle were all so moved by it because they wished that they could do that with their dad. And so all of us are, we're made of the same stuff. We're processing. This isn't to diminish or marginalize, right? That someone's been through things that are way more horrific than I've been through, but I think we're all after the same stuff.
That is so beautiful. Thank you for sharing all of that. And we haven't really talked a whole lot about our ideas around cursing. And my general when we're in the moment of the passion of sometimes you just got to let it rip. And in the we don't want us to be the show that's degrading into just sailor talk constantly. And at the same time, sometimes it's necessary to insert expletive here just to drive the point home. Alina is in the chat oh yeah. So yes, thank you for kind of reiterating the mind-blowing expression of the experience with the can I curse? I really want to curse this. And I love hearing about the way that you shared this experience with your dad and how it opened up what Matthew was just asking about, healing the father wound and how that ends up looking, and just your experience with these other men. And I'm very curious since then how that has impacted your work as a coach and also in the accounting profession. Has it shifted how you interact with other people, in particular men?
Yeah, I would have a harder time saying very tangibly how it's impacted the work I'm doing in accounting. But what I can say is that I feel more in my power having conversations with everyone that I come across. So that ventures from accounting, my personal life, and my coaching business. There's something around. Let me share this. I think this gets to the heart of what you're talking about. I was sharing this experience with my coach, and I said, I feel like I'm a transformed man. And he had me do this embodiment exercise. What does it feel like in your body to be in this power that you're in? And I had this image of being I felt really grounded. So like a tree that evokes a tree for me, really grounded. My roots are deep and firm. And I also had this beating chest energy, not with a false bravado or anything, but just I know what I'm about. I care about people, and I'm not going to hide that. And so the image that it evoked for me was, I call it the fire tree. And my coach said, you're updating your contact info, which I love. He said, you were this person before. This is called updating your contact info, and you're this transformed person. So now, a lot of times when I go into my accounting office, what I've noticed is there's more of these random serendipitous moments of coworkers sharing with me things that they might have not shared before, opening up to me about something, or having to cry in my arms or something like that, where, I don't know if that's necessarily an expression of how my work has changed, but I do think that there's something about the level of embodiment that shows anyone, even whether they're conscious of it or not, I'm safe talking to Mike right now. And I need to cry. So I'm going to go cry to Mike. And I think that's the most beautiful gift that I could ever offer another person. That's been true in every area of my life. And not to say that I'm perfect, of course. There's moments where people present their pain to me and I still might flinch or not handle in the way that I would ideally handle it. But more often now, I feel like I'm able to meet people where they are, and that's what I aspire to.
Cool. Yeah, Ingrid, if you don't mind, I'm going to jump in because I want to. So one of the things that we're doing at the Accounting Alchemy Network is we've been gathering this community of people who are caring for a conversation around what it means to create a humane workplace, right? And in your sharing in this story of people being able to come to you and express themselves, it's it reminds me that that we are our most powerful when we are able to be fully expressed individually and collectively. And so it's not, you know, I think there's this sort of like perception of, oh, don't bring that stuff to the office, be strong, be this way, be quote, you know, that, and to be explicit about it, it's the toxic masculinity of like show up and be cutthroat, right? Because that's how you win in business. And actually, there's another way of being. And I sort of recently kind of interacted with this concept of the divine masculine, right? They talk about like the divine feminine, and I think in it, when white men in particular come to the table for the first time to deal with masculinity or racism, there's this sort of like resistance, because like, oh, there's something wrong with me. I was born a problem because I'm a white male and everybody's telling me I'm bad, right? Well, actually, there's this something else there to be discovered around divine masculinity, and that creates the space for sort of a greater way of being and holding a container for others. And so I put all that context in there because I think I'm curious, you know, if you kind of now look back at your career and you think about like what advice you would give yourself and the colleagues that you've worked with on this journey in this industry, knowing what you now know through this lens, like what would that advice be? And it goes back to, I think, to this question about the talent issue, because I think a lot of people our age and younger are in some ways more informed than us around the problems that have been caused or created through toxic masculinity, et cetera. So I'm curious, like what advice do you have for your past self and possibly for future selves that are thinking about coming into this industry, but want to come from this more humane place of being?
Oh, there's so much that I could share to. It would be interesting to talk. I think what I would say to my younger self and what I might say to someone who wants to get into the accounting industry, but is seeing like, you know, maybe this isn't the best fit, might be something different. What I needed to hear, it's okay that you're scared. There's nothing wrong with you. And listen to yourself. I oriented myself when I was at the age or choice point in my life where it was, what do I want to do? Everything that I did was out of what I thought I was supposed to do. This is what my parents said I should do. This is what's going to make me the most money. And I think what I have since learned is that when I attune myself and am able to listen to what's happening in here, I said the phrase before to each of you that there's a fire in my belly around this work. Like, wow, what a difference it is to do that, to lead from that place. So making choices from, I know what it feels like for it to be a yes inside of me and a no inside of me is like what a more empowering place to be. So that's what I would say to myself is get in touch with yourself. You're going to find your path. Your parents had their own path. And there's no right or wrong way to do this thing. That's another thing I would say. I thought for sure I had to make this choice. I was going to be doing it for the next 40 years. And there's a million ways we can zig and zag out of different professions. For someone who is, let's just say, you know, I'm internalizing this question as, let's just say someone's 21 years old, they're about to graduate college, they have an accounting degree, and they're feeling a little bit of questioning around, where do I go? But maybe all the inertia is go work at PwC or Ernst & Young, et cetera, right? Because that certainly was the case for me. I would say to them, if you were to drown out all the noise, like, let's get still together. I'm talking to one person at a time here, but like, if we all got still together and just drop in and you think about why accounting is important to you. Why is that? What is it about accounting that feels aligned for you? Or what would be an organization that feels really aligned for you? What matters to you? Those are really big questions to orient towards. I would then, if they just needed advice, so that's a totally inner guided journey, right? Like they're gonna have their own discoveries about that. I think it's amazing that we all have different answers to those types of questions. But I would say, maybe this is my own projection, you're very young, you've got plenty of life and time ahead of you. A lot of people are probably telling you this is the biggest choice that you can ever make in your life, and you can course correct a million times over. But just think about long term, like who's the type of person that you'd want to work with and for? What's the type of organization that feels aligned for you? What are your values? What matters to you? If you follow those things, good things generally are going to happen.
That is beautiful. And when it comes to the accounting profession, I'm curious. One, I loved how you basically just led us in a grounding. Thank you for that. We try to start all of our meetings in the Accounting Alchemy Network with a grounding. It's yeah, something that is wonderful. And when we sink into that space and we get into just that quiet place within ourselves and tune in the present moment in our bodies. And for any accounting professional watching the replay of this or on here with us live right now, the question that you posed around, I forget exactly the word that you used, but what makes you passionate about the accounting profession, or what is it about the accounting, if when we feel into that, if the response that we get in our bodies is, this isn't my passion.
Mhm.
Listen to that. What is your passion then? And why? And it's something that many of us have kind of gone through. And it may be that it's not that the accounting profession as a whole isn't our passion right now. It may be that, we've stepped outside our zone of genius, or we've learned and grown, and now we need something else to spark us. And it's something that Matthew and I can relate to. Alina's in the chat relating. Alina's saying,
I would have been way too scared too. I'll
Yeah.
just put that out there, right? So like, I also want to name, like, part of, I don't have any regrets about my journey. I think it's unfolded exactly when I was ready for it. So that's a thing too.
So yeah, just the checking in. If we're getting into accounting because we've been told that that's what we should do, but that's the recipe for success, whatever success was to whoever was telling us, oh yeah, success is that way.
Mhm.
We don't even know what success is yet. What is success to each of us? What do we want? And maybe we haven't decided what we want yet. And so as we're unpacking all of those ideas and things, recognizing that our path can change and evolve and grow. And for me and Matthew, here we are, still in the accounting profession, but exercising our passions in the world. And Mike, it sounds very much like you're doing that also. And that this work with AllKings is bringing a deeper level of yourself to this game. How can we show up in our full, true, authentic selves? Because that right there is what it means to be in integrity. Integrity literally means wholeness. It's the same root as the word integer, which is a whole number. How do we show up in our whole selves? And how do we encourage our team members to do that? How can we encourage our clients to do that? And what you were saying about, being in conversations with your clients, or really anyone who sees you as a safe person that they can be fully emotional with, and that you're someone who can help to hold that space for them, hold that container for them. And it just reminds me of how often in the accounting profession are we confronted with a frightened business owner who doesn't understand their reports, who is afraid that they're going to let down their family or their teammates, the people who are depending on them. And the imposter syndrome might be coming up, thinking, oh, if you can't do this, you're going to just fail and let everybody down and quit before you even start. And that imposter syndrome, those saboteurs, it's not effective. And yet there needs to be room for us to express our fears and doubts, to get them out of the way so that we can receive the encouragement. Why would any of us be trying to do this alone?
Mhm.
We need each other. And I love that people can go to you to have those conversations. And one of the things that I'm trying to figure out is, how do we make every accounting office, where a business owner, even somebody looking through their personal finances, where each person having a challenging conversation can have that challenging conversation in a safe, effective, trauma-informed way.
Get goosebumps thinking about that. And it's such a big question. And it feels far reaching, you know, like it doesn't feel, even at the accounting firm that I'm at right now, which I enjoy, it's very male dominated, white dominated. Whether or not they say it, it's probably profit over purpose, passion, being trauma informed, like having a space that's truly inclusive. And I don't know, I think one of the ways I look at this is even though it's not my organization, I still have the choice that I can show up that way. That's what matters to me. And that there's different ways to classify leadership. So wherever I am, I'm going to do the best to model what matters to me. That to me is the way to be a change agent. For it to, there's probably naturally a rippling effect that happens. And I think the other way, which you are probably far more skilled than me, Ingrid, have conversations with people that have the influence, show them the power of your presence. You've got a powerful presence. I can confirm that.
Right back at you, sweetheart.
Well, thank you. And it's in process. I'm actually working on carving out that role in my accounting firm right now, having a coaching capacity within my accounting firm where people can show up as who they are. And the cruel irony of it all is that it actually helps make people more productive. It helps profit. It helps all the things that everyone cares about anyway. So I'm working on it. We're working on it.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, it reminds me, what you're sharing reminds me of a quote that shifted my perspective on leadership from, I think it was a Simon Sinek YouTube video I was watching, and the soundbite it was a longer 20-minute, 30-minute presentation. It's like, leadership is a lifestyle. And when I heard that, I was like, you know, because I don't know, I think up to that point, you know, it's like leadership was, oh, these are the things that you do when you show up to the office and you have to tell people what to do. And this is what it means to be a good telling people what to do person. And you follow these, you know, whatever. And then when I heard that leadership is a lifestyle, I was like, wait a second. So how I show up, walking out the door, going to the grocery store, you know, interacting with the bank teller, like all of that, or interacting with my family or my friends or my colleagues in the office or my clients, every single moment is an opportunity to express your leadership. And so therefore, what kind of a leader do you want to be? Right. And so I love that you bring this forward, because it's not like you have to do some big grandiose thing and like go out there and fix something with your newly found leadership skills around, you know, saving the planet, right? But rather just showing up and being a great person, right? Being kind to your current clients and letting them see something different of you and inside of you. It's like that unlocks the you know, it's like a, I don't know, it's just visually, I just like imagine like these little gateways opening up of like, oh, you open up a gateway for another person to be more themselves and to be happier and to be fulfilled, right? So I think there's something really important to just acknowledge like where you're at and the power that you have in the place that you're at. But I wanted to ask you another question, because early on you had mentioned in your experience, you sort of slipped it in there, and I want to go back to it and grab that moment. And you talked about how you were out in nature in this experience, and I would love to hear from you, sort of what is the importance of nature in sort of doing this work that you've done, and in what role has that played in helping you to update your contact list, as you said earlier?
Yeah. I'll say there are two things are coming to mind with regard to nature. There's a lot that we could say about just what happens in our inner state if we just walk in the woods for an hour, which is something that I aspire to do on a pretty regular basis. Get outside, just notice how more connected I feel to something much bigger than me. two specific things about the weekend in nature. There was one exercise where we were all circled up, and each person, each man, had an opportunity to process their anger and be seen in their anger in front of the group. And it was with like a rock, and we were able to like throw it into the ground. It was a really big release of anger. And yeah, everyone was yelling about things that we feel aligned about. Fucking capitalism, patriarchy, everyone's yelling about all these different things, which it stirred up a lot in all of us. But there were probably 10 people in any given circle. There were several circles because there were about 50 people there. And after each man went of the 10, we all went down on the ground, took a knee, put a hand on the ground, and we all thanked the land for holding us. And the land is always holding us, whether or not we were doing that exercise in particular or not. The land is always holding us. And so it was, call it a prayer. We thanked the land. I forget the exact words that were spoken, but we said, thank you for holding us in all of our mess, allowing us to process our anger. We know that humans have been destructive to you, and you've been there unwaveringly the whole way through, and we really appreciate you. So there was that was one of several examples of ways that we honored, or rituals around this thing that we're doing is much bigger than just the humans that are interacting here. We're being supported by the land. After the moment I had with my dad, where I was really addressing my core wounds and had this really healing conversation with him, I had almost the way after breath work. I don't know if you're familiar with the sensation of the euphoric high after doing breath work, or even after a good run or exercise or something. This was like 10x that. I was like, I addressed this wound that I hadn't, in a way, I had done work around it, but never directly eye to eye with my dad, with the love there. After that moment happened, I was kind of looking around my desk because I have it somewhere. I got a rock that commemorates. I do have it. Yes, as a matter of fact. So there was a guide who was there who gave me this rock and said, always commemorate that moment with this rock. And there's something so beautiful about it. It's just a stone. This is, again, the way that we're meaning making machines. I could walk past a stone like this every single day and be like, it's a stone. What's the big deal? But this now symbolizes the healing conversation I had with my dad. So what I did was I took this stone, I kept it up against my heart, and I sat in the woods amongst a bunch of trees. There was a river flowing, and was quiet by myself, looking up at the sky for, I'll say, 20 minutes or so. And I just felt so held by myself being in the woods. Like there was a life force there that is hard to put into words. And when I am in that place, I feel connected to everything. Like I could be alone, but I feel extremely connected. And that's the power. That's what I think nature can do. Is I imagine sometimes if I were to live in the woods. It was also camping, by the way, this whole trip. So I was outside, I could hear all the animals, something really healing about that. But I imagine that if I knew that my safety was taken care of and I lived in the woods for a year, that I would feel really connected. I don't think I would feel alone.
Got it. Now, Ingrid, I know you have something to say about the leadership piece, and I want to get to that, but I just want to make one quick comment. Because I like that. I actually love that you just came back to the meaning making piece of the puzzle, because I think one of the things that gets uncovered in particular. So one of the programs that we guide people through is a course called the Game Changer Intensive. It's through the Pachamama Alliance, and it's a really powerful program because it helps people to sort of see things from a broader perspective and go deep in different areas about what's going on in the world and how they can get involved and such. And all that to say that what often gets or is misunderstood is the interconnectedness of all the things, right? So it's like racism is connected to climate justice. And so because how we treat other people is how we treat the planet. And also in the context of this whole meaning making thing, it's like, wait a second, we're humans, so we made this whole story up, which means that we can change it. And so if you start to change it in one area, right? Like if you start to change it in how you relate to your food, right? Or that rock, you change the story about who that rock is or what that rock is, all of a sudden, the whole story starts to unravel, subconsciously even. It's like, oh, wait a second, the story is shifting and disappearing and evolving and growing. And so, yeah, so thank you for sharing that story, because I think it's important for people to understand and see how interconnected the pieces are of the puzzle. Ingrid, over to you for your leadership inquiry.
Before we get into leadership, I want to bring attention to, we have a lively conversation going on over in the Facebook Live side of this conversation. So anyone who's watching the replay on YouTube, also go check out the Facebook group, because we've got Mariette Martinez and Heather Satterley blowing up the chat over there. And I love what you're saying. Heather says, growth interest mindset right there, constantly learning, constantly evolving, open to changes in yourself, powerful. And prior to that, she was saying, at the end of the day, we are all human and have our own insert curse word here. And Mariette is asking, how do we show up as our whole selves? What does that look like? And she was also asking where the links are to attend live if you want to be on the conversation in Zoom, since it's so much easier to monitor the chat here in Zoom, where Alina is saying, so effing healing, because, effing is not quite a curse word. Those links are available in our newsletter. They're posted on the LinkedIn and Facebook groups. We try to get them out as much as possible. You are welcome to register to join us here on Zoom, and we would love to have your chats in the room. And depending on the style of conversation we're having in the Lyceum, sometimes we even pull people out of the chat of just come elaborate on that. So we're open to the spontaneity of a lot of these conversations, and loving the active participation going on in the chat in the background. This is such a beautiful conversation. And the leadership piece, Matthew's tossing it back my way, because leadership is one of my zones of nerdy. And I think that you're both really hitting the nail on the head with what you were just saying, Matthew and Mike, around, Mike, what you said earlier, like, we're the meaning making machines. That's what human beings are. We're writing this story, we're creating this. And just this last week, so at Scaling New Heights a couple weeks ago, I had the opportunity to have a wonderful conversation with Ed Kless, and he reminded me once again about Peter Block's work. He recommended years ago Peter Block's book, Freedom and Accountability at Work. And Peter Block just came out with another book, which is Confronting Our Freedom. And Ron Baker and Ed Kless recently had on their podcast, which is The Soul of Enterprise, Peter Block interviewing him about his most recent book. And I listened to that podcast just a handful of days ago, and I'm like, oh my gosh, yes. Because leadership, true leadership, is not about changing someone else's behavior. Leadership is confronting others with their freedom, whatever that is to them. Recognizing that freedom and accountability are the same thing. In order to be accountable, we have to be free. And in order to be free, we have to be accountable to our freedom. Are we going to show up on our full, true, authentic selves? What does it mean? And how do we empower others to be their full, true, authentic selves? And how do we get past the trauma to be able to do that, recognizing that trauma can take a lot of different forms? It can be an isolated incident, or it can be longer term, things that are just too much for too long of a period of time, or too little for too long of a period of time. And I was just taking a course on trauma-informed coaching earlier this week. And one of the things that I was learning about in that course was the idea of practiced social nervous system. And this is something that was very poignant for me when I was hearing about it, but I'd never known what it was called. Practiced social nervous system is when we put on that good face of, no, everything is fine. And no one can tell what our inner storm looks like. No one outside of us, and even sometimes us, we try to keep our stuff together and, power through, and we'll be okay. And we're so good at lying about it at this point that we've even convinced ourselves that we're okay when we're in total fight, flight, freeze, fawn. Our limbic brain is running the show. How do we get past those practiced social nervous system responses to truly invite our own whole selves and the whole selves of others to the table, to be able to express our emotions in healthy, effective ways, be able to more effectively learn to regulate our nervous systems? What does it look like to begin the process of shifting those behaviors? What do you think, Mike?
I just,
no pressure.
After listening to you talking, Ingrid, I just want to be a bystander now. I had at the back end there, I just had my hand on my heart and I was just like, yes, more of this. This is beautiful. How do we address this? Because it resonates a lot with me. What you're sharing was true for me. I felt.
So what was your first step?
Yeah,
like, let's reframe the question. Let's reframe the question. So when you were embarking on this journey and you were starting the process of figuring out something's got to shift here, and you had that aha moment, and we're trying to figure out, how do I begin? What does this path look like? What was your first step? Do you remember?
I have a few things that I did. I started listening to podcasts, which I hadn't been doing previously, or maybe was only listening to entertainment types of podcasts. I was curious about what do other people do when they feel stuck, and found my way to a bunch of amazing stuff. I started going to therapy, and I think that just doing a couple of things like that started the cascading. Okay, well, if that worked a little bit, but it didn't, there's more to do, and let me try this other thing. So I found coaching, therapy was helping me feel seen and safe with people, but also like I wasn't getting to the depth or having the shifts that I was wanting to have. Coaching started to bring that for me. And this is really interesting, actually. One of the first coaching exercises that the first coach I worked with had me do was reach out to 5 people, tell them what you were doing. And that was really powerful for me because I actually felt a lot of shame around being the type of person who needed a coach. So just sharing that I was up to this thing with 5 people, I started to then build I'm not broken. I additionally invited one of those people out to lunch and had a conversation with him about why I started doing this. And so those are some of the initial ripples that happened for me, where slowly but surely the armor and the mask was coming down. And I didn't feel broken for having gone through all these things. I actually felt incredibly human. And I think we all go through all these things, which is what I've learned time and time again. When I show up now in something that's on my edge, or that I have a lot of fear around, or formerly had shame about, I realize that it's actually inviting me into even more depth and connection with people in my humanity.
That is beautiful. Thank you. And I want to also note, Heather in Facebook is saying forgiveness and self-compassion.
Yes.
Yeah, those are huge. Being able to get past that shame by forgiving ourselves. And I think as leaders who are confronting others with their freedom, that maybe for those watching this who see us as leaders as if we have everything all together, and they're not seeing the mess that goes on the background of all of this, that getting a little peek behind the curtain of some of what we're currently doing or going through. I mean, right now, like here, Mike, you and I have been talking for the last month or so about, okay, I've had this idea in my head to put together a leadership development course to be able to teach some of these things for others. And it's been in my head for a year and I haven't pulled the trigger on it because I need accountability. And you said, hey, I'll be your accountability. And now I've got to move the needle on that before our next meeting. And that's something that I'm working on, to be able to bring some of these tools to others. And we're building this plane as we fly it out of super glue and duct tape and have no idea what we are doing.
Mm-hmm.
and still have all of the emotional WTF going on behind the scenes. That practice social nervous system, I learned that at a very young age. And for the most part, people cannot tell when I am not okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so being able to put that out there to not just 5 people, but to a room full of people of like, no, really, I understand what you're feeling. You just can't tell because I had to practice when I was very, very young, not showing my emotions. So what does that end up looking like for us to be able to show up more authentically so that people can see us in our true selves, in our leadership, and encourage them to feel at home with us? Because if they're putting us on some kind of pedestal, that's not effective.
Mm-hmm. Can I also share another a tool, a technology that has been incredibly helpful for fostering
Please.
self-compassion? Kristen Neff does really amazing work on self-compassion, so I'll plug that. But what's been really helpful for me is my work with internal family systems, also called parts work. And if we look at, I don't know if either of you are familiar with parts work, but if you look at, interesting, if we look at ourselves as a series of lots of different, an inner cast of characters. We might have an inner skeptic, an inner dreamer, visionary, someone who's really pragmatic. We probably all have inner accountants, number crunchers. We're all very multifaceted. And what happens, I think what rhymes with what you're talking about here, Ingrid, is we have learned over time which parts of us are most celebrated and which parts of us are most rejected. And over time, if we don't do our own work, the parts that are most celebrated, most accepted by the people we care most about, they start driving the bus all the time. And we have other parts that get shoved into the corner. So when we make space to get to know the parts of ourselves that are maybe more shadowy or that we've felt ashamed about in the past, and it's the magic that's possible when we get into inner dialogue with all of us, all of who we are, then it fosters immense compassion. Because in the most spiritual of ways, like Ram Dass would say, we are love, right? I think we're just fundamentally, we are love. So when we kind of shift out of story and are just open to, I'm curious about this part of me, I'm compassionate towards this part of me, you get to learn things about that part that you realize the beautiful humanity of that part of you too, the part that you've been ashamed of your whole life. And that has been immensely helpful for me, because I learned from a young age, not from my parents, but from being out in the world, that it wasn't okay to be quiet, wasn't okay to be awkward, wasn't okay to be scared, wasn't okay to be soft, tender, etc. And so getting to know those parts of me and actually seeing their strength and their power, their conviction, that to me is a powerful way to foster self-compassion and self-love.
Cool. Thank you, Mike. And we are coming up at the very end of our session. So first of all, mind blown. There's so much juicy content in this. And I know those of you watching or those of you paying attention to the replay know somebody in your community or your network who might value from listening to this audio and or watching this video. And if you are watching this on YouTube or enjoying this in one of our social feeds, either LinkedIn or Facebook, please feel free to leave a comment below and start a dialogue around some of the things that have been brought up here. We want to encourage conversation above and beyond the container of the actual live stream itself. Now, that being said, I do want to offer a few announcements or shout outs to a couple of things. So first of all, August is just around the corner. And Ingrid and I were just talking about what we're going to do in August. So I just want to let you all know 2 things. One, we have a social forum that we're planning for August 23rd. That's Wednesday, August 23rd at 12:30 p.m. Pacific time. We're going to gather the community together around a specific topic, and we're going to have a conversation and let the social dynamics of the people that are in the space guide the conversation. So keep your eye out on our newsletter for that. Make sure you register. I already told you the date and the time, so you can go to your calendar now, mark it, and make sure that you're there for that. But the other really important thing to keep in mind, I mentioned it earlier, the Game Changer Intensive. It's one of the, what I would say, frankly, one of the pillars of the work that we do inside of the Accounting Alchemy Network. And we do that in collaboration and in partnership through the Pachamama Alliance. They have this amazing bit of content that they've structured out for us. But there is a clear registration deadline for that. The information will be going out in the newsletter. We're working on that soon. But again, for those of you listening or watching the replay, pay note that the enrollment begins Sunday, August 27th, or rather that I should say the enrollment closes. Oh my, okay, you got to mark your calendar. August 27th, and then the orientation begins August 29th. I can't tell you how important it is to be a part of this, this community, this initiative, and how essential and powerful it is to go through the Game Changer Intensive. So please mark your calendars. When you get the email from Ingrid or me or the newsletter, register right away, because we have seen some powerful shifts in people within the community once they go through that program. And then the last thing I'll say, right, we are working to build a community driven by the community. So if you're inspired by today's conversation and you have an idea for a social forum or a Lyceum that you want to bring to the table, or perhaps you yourself are practicing something inside of your accounting business that you want to share with the world, reach out to us. Let's get you on the calendar so that you can share what you're up to or lead a conversation around something that inspires you. Remember, we want your voice as a leader in this community as well. So with that, Ingrid, is there anything else you want to say before we close the live stream today?
Just thank you so much for the beautiful conversation in the background. I love how lively the chat was. And thank you so much, Mike, for joining us and for all the beautiful work that you are doing in the world. I'm just, my heart is bursting. This is beautiful. Thank you.
Right back at you. Thanks so much for having me.
Yay. Bye, everybody.
All later.